Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
Maryland voters went to the polls this week in the state's primaries. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Dodd Rush. In the governor's race, the big story has been Dan Cox, the Trump-backed candidate who defeated Kelly Schultz, who was supported by Governor Larry Hogan. The Democratic side is still too close to call, with Wes Moore, Tom Perez, and Peter Franchot in the upper tier. At the local level, Julie Giordano is leading in her race against the acting Wicomico County Executive, John Bassett, for the Republican nomination. On the Wicomico County Board of Education, the Delmarva Parent-Teacher Coalition appears to have made some inroads. Worcester County will take a look at the outcome of the commission races there and the fate of the proposed sports complex. In our studio this morning is Greg Bassett. He's the general manager and editor of the Salisbury Independent newspaper. And on the phone with us is Stephen Green, publisher and editor of the Maryland Coast Dispatch. So the biggest news coming out of Tuesday, obviously, was Dan Cox winning the Republican nomination for governor against Kelly Schultz. And, of course, Hogan has decided that he would not support Dan Cox, and both he and Trump, of course, have been trading barbs for a long time in this campaign. In a statement, Hogan said Trump lost Republicans the White House, the House, and the Senate. He selfishly colluded with national Democrats. It cost us a governor's seat in Maryland, where I ran 45 points ahead of him. Of course, the Governors Association spent some $2 million in ads focusing to make it easier for Cox to win. What are we to make of this fight at the top tier?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Clearly, the person, Maryland is a majority Democratic state. They have a 2-to-1 voter registration lead. So what you end up with on the Republican side is a pretty radical group of people in the minority party. And that really came out in terms of the election. And this Governors Association thing is interesting. I got 2 mailers at my house. I got 3 mailers at my house. I got one from Dan Cox, which featured 3 pictures of him with Trump, saying that he was the Trump preferred candidate. And then I got 2 mailers after that with the same pictures, pretty much, of Dan Cox and Donald Trump together, with being touted as the too conservative for Maryland, is what the Democrats were saying. So it's kind of a game that they were playing because they wanted to get Cox as the nominee because he has the least chance of winning against whatever the Democrat prevails in this primary.
Steve, is this where the Republican Party is in the state at this point?
It appears to be. I mean, this is very disturbing. I was very surprised. The Baltimore Sun on their front page had surprising primary, and the Cox is the lead story. Worcester County voters, Cox doubled up Schultz in Worcester County, and Schultz had support over here. We actually had advertising from local restaurant owners and business owners that really wanted Schultz because of the Hogan connection and the belief that Hogan, helped the shore largely over those 8 years. This is a surprise, and I think now you turn, honestly, to me, I turn to who is the most moderate of the Democratic candidates. That was still up in the air, though it looks pretty clearly that we probably have a winner there more. But that was a surprising one to me too, that Franchot did as poorly as he did, and namely that his home county is Montgomery County, and he finished in 3rd place in his home county in Montgomery County. He was a delegate there for over 20 years.
So, in terms of the kinds of issues that these folks are running on, for instance, as Cox's delegate, he offered up bills to severely restrict abortion, expand gun access, outlaw future efforts to fight pandemics, I guess, as it were, railed against transgender issues. Greg, is this the shape of the Republican Party in terms of the particular issues that they're going to be running on?
Well, we see this with politicians all the time. Once they win the primary, they've got to position themselves one way to win the primary, and then they pivot. The question is, will Dan Cox pivot? I don't think he's going to pivot, and I think he's going to continue the kind of the culture war that's going on. In Wicomico County, the question is, Julie Giordano, who's leading in the county executive race, she has aligned herself very closely with Dan Cox. So, what we will do during the general election coverage is figure out whether we can tie her to his issues. Will she bring a cultural battle here to Wicomico, or will she pivot away from that?
Good. So the other one that I did not expect was Michael Perutka apparently has taken the Republican nomination for Attorney General. He apparently has ties to a far-right group called the League of the South. Its organization, for instance, its president said that blacks never created anything approximately a civilization in the Western sense of the term. on various issues. Baruch has talked about separation of church and state as a great lie, wants to dismantle public education, calling to the 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto, amongst other things. Greg, does this just sort of fit in with what's going on? Does it surprise you that the moderate, at least most people at least seem to think of, just didn't get it?
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Maryland hasn't had a Republican attorney general ever that I can find, so I don't think that's going to change this time. Anthony Brown beat Katie O'Malley, or appears to be beating Katie O'Malley for the Democratic nomination. Anthony Brown's run statewide 3 different times as lieutenant governor twice, and he ran for governor. He's well known, and he's not going to have any trouble with this guy.
I mean, in terms of Brown, I mean, this is sort of his second time around. He was a lieutenant governor, ran for governor, and lost. Do you think he learned anything?
I don't know. That's a good question. He's giving up a congressional seat, a very safe congressional seat, to be attorney general. So it's obvious to me that he's got statewide ambitions still in his resume.
What about you, Steve? How do you read that, particularly out of Worcester County?
Yeah, well, I just think we know that the Democrats are going to cruise in November. Honestly, I hate to discourage turnout or anything like that, but the Republican Party has put forward the most extreme candidates we can, and to your point of what you're saying, it means, and it clearly shows that at least that faction of the Republican Party turned out on primary day. And I agree with Greg with his sentiment of, is anybody going to come to the middle or try to pose themselves as more moderates? It's clear they are not, and I think the result of that in November is going to be landslide wins for the Democratic Party, which is disturbing. I think we all hope for a little bit more of a balanced competition, and the history has shown in Maryland that moderate Republican candidates such as Ehrlich and Hogan do find success in Maryland. But this is the opposite way to go, and everyone's a lot of people are opining. The Republican Party hurt itself tremendously.
Greg?
And Don, I do want to say something about Wes Moore. I thought Peter Franchot was going to prevail, and he did win the lower shore counties because he's down here a lot. We knew him, and I was really surprised by this. I did not know Wes Moore. I was talking to my daughter who goes to Towson University, and she was in Ocean City this week, and she actually drove home to Towson to make sure that she voted because she wanted to vote for Wes Moore so much because she was inspired by his book. She wasn't even sure who her Congress member was. She didn't know who her state senator was or who her delegate was, where she lives in Towson. But she knew Wes Moore, and she did a 5-hour round trip just to vote for him. So there's a passion for Wes Moore, and I think he's going to end up winning this.
By the way, just briefly, I want to turn to Heather Mazier. She won handily, of course, her primary. How do you see that matchup? Steve, I think the previous program, you thought she might have a better chance than maybe Greg and I think she might have had.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm wishful thinking there that Andy Harris will be challenged, more because I just, as a journalist and community member, I don't like to see these lopsided races. But you all probably are more right than I am on this one. I think he probably will have an easier time. I just hope that maybe that voters would consider maybe somebody of a different ilk. And I don't know. I guess as you probably are getting the point about, I tend to like folks that are a little bit more moderate as my representatives. I'm not saying Missouri's necessarily moderate, but we definitely know where Andy is, and he is more, in my mind, towards the extremists of our party, i.e. Cox and Peruka.
Yeah, and also Heather has raised more money in the last quarter than Harris. They're pretty close in terms of fundraising. She's spent more. He's got more because he's held on to more. But I can't remember the last time a Democrat was raising as much money as Andy Harris going into a general election.
Do you think, Greg, that there's perhaps an enthusiasm kind of quality to her particular candidacy that may very well at least give Harris a real run for his money?
Yeah, I don't know that many people are excited about her, but I think there's a negative vibe going on with Andy right now because he's had a series of weird incidents where he tried to take a gun into the House chamber. He got into a fight on the floor with a member. He was in this January 6th meeting in which they talked about how to overthrow the election. Andy's just on this weird course, and we'll see whether that if the voters pick up on that and decide to care.
I want to turn to the Wicomico County Executive. We got to Julie Giordano. She is leaning at least to John Bassett, the acting county executive. Greg, how do you read this one? Is that a surprise to you? And as obviously we have more ballots to count.
Right. So the listeners know on Thursday morning they began at 10 o'clock counting the mail-in ballots. if a mail-in ballot, if someone possesses a mail-in ballot or mailed in a mail-in ballot, as long as it has the Tuesday postmark on it, they will accept it up until next Friday. We're not really sure yet how many ballots are out there or how many are going to be coming in, so we don't really know. It's going to be an excruciating next 7 days as we try to figure out this race. She's got about a 500 vote lead right now, so if the trend holds, you would think she's going to win. She got more election day votes than Pasota. Pasota got more early voting votes than Giordano, so you don't know how you read into that. But I think there's going to be some more back and forth on this thing over the next week.
Given her particular ties to Trump and so on, and then to Cox, I mean, what are we to make of how she looks at the world ideologically, impacting how she will run the county? Or is there necessarily a direct correlation? Because once you're in charge of something, you got a whole other set of issues which don't necessarily fit into a nice ideological basket.
Well, it's funny. We talk about power all the time, and we don't talk about issues as much as we want. So if you think about it, Julie and John were pretty much aligned on some of the more important issues, at least to the business community. She backs the water and sewer plan that's been adopted for the county, so she wants to fund and build that. She's a supporter of the airport, which is one of those things that a lot of people don't get, the economic importance of the airport. She's not a proponent of the downtown tax break that we gave to build the high rises, the big ticket items down there. But she might be open to being educated on that. She's not going to come out in favor of getting rid of the revenue cap, which we see affecting our budget every year. She's a teacher, so she seems to be in favor of funding schools. We'll see what her mindset is on that. So on issues, she kind of reflects the community. The question is, will she bring this cultural war to Wicomico County? Will we start having more resolutions brought to the council about, letting people carry guns, or what the other issues that are going to be that end up being culture? If she ends up getting involved in the school system in terms of critical race theory or teaching cursive writing, those things. That's what's going to be the question if she ultimately gets elected.
What a turn, by the way, to the Wicomico County Council, District 1. We've got, at least the last stats I saw, Monica Brooks was ahead of Shani Shields, the former city council person. Amber Green, fairly far behind. I think she had about 20%, I think is what I was looking at one point. How do you read that? Is that a surprise to you that it divides out that way?
Well, Amber had a little problem. Last time we were on, we were trying to figure out what happened with Amber, and she got into a little spat on social media over the shooting of the Wicomico County police officer, and she said some things that people disagreed with, and it was so painful for her, I think, that she just pretty much stopped her campaign. And Monica Brooks just prevailing through. She's in a tight battle with Shani, and we'll have to see based on the mail-in votes where they go. It's very close.
Also, I want to mention Larry Dodd. He looks like he's far behind, may have been defeated, who knows, by Shane Baker. He's been on the council for a long time. It's a name I remember hearing often.
Yeah, Larry's had two stints. He was on the council, then he was on the school and lost a re-election to Gail Barkovich. Then he was on the school board for a while. Then he got elected. He's 2 terms back on the council. Larry had some missteps while he was council president, and recently, certainly here last spring, with the whole pickleball incident.
What's that?
Well, we were trying to build the county wanted to build a pickleball court over at Harmon Field. Larry thought it should be maintained for softball or baseball. He wrote a letter to the Board of Public Works, the governor, and the comptroller and the treasurer, saying that it would be a mistake for the state to fund this. He didn't inform his council colleagues that he had done this. It kind of blew up, and I think Larry kind of paid the price for that. In terms of issues, Shane is just as conservative as Larry. So in terms of how they vote, I don't think that's going to change.
I want to turn, Steve, to the Worcester County Board of Commissioners. Particularly, obviously, District 3 looks like it's shaping up. It does not look good for the sports complex.
Well, sure, yeah. In our county, we had 5 commissioner seats open this election cycle. 2 candidates. The Wicomico commissioner, he's a Democrat, Josh Nordstrom. He's opposed by Republicans, so that'll be in November. And then we had our Ishland City commissioner unopposed. So where it stands today, as Greg mentioned, canvassing of ballots is taking place. We do have the numbers for these. We have a few. I'll get to the sports complex in a minute, but we have 3 districts that are too close to call at this point. three districts that are decided, with incumbent Chip Bertino and Jim Bunting cruising pretty easily, and even with the mail-in ballots shouldn't change. And Diana Purnell, Commissioner District 2, crushed her opponent, getting 83% of the vote. So the districts that are open are District 3 and 4. District 3 was the one we talked about last week, where longtime Commissioner Bud Church has retired. And there's 235 mail-in ballots that will be counted today, and then, as Greg outlined, that process that will take place over the next week that's so different than in the past. And at this point, Eric Fury has a slim lead, 30-some votes. In District 4, we have 4 commissioners running against, including incumbent Ted Elder, and 25 votes separate the 4 at this point, with 231 mail-in ballots. So that race is very much up for grabs. And it's interesting in that one that half of the 230 mail-ins are from a precinct in the southern end of the county, so that may favor 2 of the candidates more so than the other. But back to your point on the sports complex. Well, it's certainly early to tell, because we don't have our official changes yet, but the point that we're following now is that it does appear that the majority of the commissioners is going to swing with this election. We talked about that last week, really, no matter the outcome. And that will be interesting. On the sports complex, the decision has proceeded already, so that's in place, and they're not going to necessarily go back on the acquisition. But if the referendum falls one way, perhaps the county does not want, county voters find they do not want to proceed with the bond that allows for the development of it, that would send the county back to the drawing board, you would think, although the commission president, Joe Matresic, has not said that the referendum vote will dictate the future direction of the county, which is interesting, because it would say that the bond cannot proceed. But the county commission president, Joe Matresic, is not saying that means that the sports complex is derailed entirely. They may use alternative funding for it. But he would need the votes to proceed with that, and the sports complex acquisition was approved by a 4-3 vote. So while it's still unknown, it does appear that majority is going to flip with this election, with the people that are winning as of today.
Great.
Steve, I just want to talk about District 4 real quick, because I was surprised. Nancy Bradford ran a really aggressive campaign, and I just thought she was going to kill Ted Elder, but she's trailing.
Yeah, she is trailing, but as I mentioned, only 25 votes separate her and the first place Ted Elder at this point. And that's where you really need to dive deep into these ballots, and which kind of board of elections is great for us to deal with. And I know that's not the case in all jurisdictions, but they provided us with the mail-in ballot numbers, and it's 231 in that district, and 114 of them come from the south end of the county. Now, who that you would presume that would have favored the 2 candidates that are from that south end of the county. That district in Worcester County goes from the northern boundary to the southern boundary. It's a vast, large portion of the county. It just doesn't have as many citizens, and it has a lot of farmland. But, no candidate in that district is giving up. In District 3, we did have Tom Goulias concede to the eventual winner. Maybe he knows something that we don't know, but there is still a chance for him, depending on the canvassing of these ballots.
Yeah, and in Wicomico, I don't have the mail-in ballot total. There's leadership change there, and they're very busy, so I'm having trouble making contact. Yeah. But I owe it to the readers to make sure I nail that stuff down today, because we have got to be able to do the math in our heads to figure out what might happen.
Such as mail-in ballots, right?
Yes.
That's the big difference, right? It's so different from an election.
Yeah.
We're all familiar with the mail.
Yeah, I was on deadline Tuesday night, and I tried to produce a traditional election day type paper, and it was impossible. So all I could do was just give people the results of what it was at 11 o'clock, and then hope that our information was going to prove accurate in the long run.
And not many victory gatherings
none.
that night at all.
We had none to shoot. There was no one having a party.
I want to turn to the Board of Education in Wicomico County. As I said, it looks like the Delmarva Parent Teachers Coalition is making at least some inroads. Greg, from what I'm looking at in terms of the Board of Education, looks like Darren Lombardo and Kristen Hazel looks like they have a good chance perhaps at the at-large. Also, Susan Beecham looks like very strong showing in District 3. What are we to make of what's going on there?
Yeah, so there were 8 people running for the at-large seat in the nonpartisan school board races. 4 people will advance to November, and 2 of the 4, as you mentioned, are in that group. The other two would be George Demko and Bonnie Ennis. Bonnie is a career school teacher. Everyone knows her. Everyone likes her. She's leading all the voters. Demko was in fourth place the last I saw. I was surprised that Kristen Hazel got more votes than Darren Lombardo. But yeah, this is going to be very interesting as the four people fight in November.
Do you think this thing can then essentially we're going to hear a lot of cultural issues in? And how? When I look at my Facebook page, I get a lot of stuff like from Lombardo, and it's constant. I mean, obviously he targeted a lot of the individuals that he didn't want with these generally sort of far right themes.
Well, we'll see, because there were two people on the school board already who went in and we thought they were going to be far right, and it was Ann Sukowski and John Palmer. And I don't know if they were co-opted or if they just had an impression of what went on in the schools as an outsider, and then they got inside and they realized, wait, this is way more complicated than we thought. They're doing a way better job than we thought. And they ended up being part of the majority on every vote. They really, became part of the system. In District 5 is where Palmer is. He's got an opponent who's even to the right of him, and he's one of the most far-right people that I know. But they're all very pro-education. So even though these people are running one way, once they become part of the problem, part of the system, it'll be interesting to see how they fight it.
Just to follow up on Lombardo, I mean, he seems to be very intent on these cultural issues. It's
Yes.
hard for me to see him veering away or seeing himself as part of the establishment.
It's the pivot that we talk about. I don't see that. But like I said, as bombastic as he is, that Kristen Hazel, who's not so much bombastic and believes all the same things, that she got more votes, that maybe that's telling somehow.
I want to turn to you, Steve, because I couldn't find anything about the two candidates, or at least the three candidates for the Worcester County Board of Education. At least two of them, including Katie Addis, seem to be within, say, a similar mold in terms of the critique of the school district. What's going on there?
Yes, that's correct. And they, just a reminder that our it's nonpartisan as well for the school board, but there was no election this primary. Those will all be decided in the general election. So yeah, that's definitely a movement up front. We talked about last week. The status quo versus these game changer or change agents that really want to see massive changes to the way the school board operates, maybe undermine the superintendent's authority some. As you all probably know, oftentimes in these public education boards, the superintendent drives policy, drives the really drives the movements of how the schools are operated because they're the experts. So, school board members typically are not ones to buck against the agenda of the superintendent. They hire the superintendent and trust him or her to run the show. Now, these candidates will be ones that will be looking to ask more questions, challenge, see some change. But yeah, that's in November. That'll be on our front here. So,
I'll turn, by the way, to the delegate district 37B. We've got Chris Adams, Tim Hutchinson, Nicole Ackley, who is now on the Wicomico County Council. Greg, how do you see that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because there was all this complication in that this is a district that spans 4 different counties, and the rule is only one delegate can come from one county. So you had a situation where Nicole Ackley was basically running against Chris Adams to be the Wicomico representative for District 37B. Chris ended up aligning his campaign with Tom Hutchison, so they sort of ran together as a team. They were the top 2 vote getters through Tuesday, at least, before the mail-in ballots are counted. Nicole is in third. There's another candidate who's way back and forth. But it looks like those 2 are going to prevail and that they'll advance.
One of the big surprises, at least for me, was the big defeat for State Senator Addie Eckert.
I actually wasn't as surprised, just based on the feedback that I get. Addie's great. She's terrific. She's fun. She's just been in there a long time. And if you look at Johnny Moutz's campaign, he ran a textbook right-wing campaign. I mean, the things he said were even more right-wing than what I think he believes. It was a playbook that's been proven. And he stomped her. He just stomped her. So he'll proceed on to the general election in November.
Steve, how do you see her legacy?
Oh man, I just remember I was watching WBOC, and you don't hear Steve Hammond editorialize much on, but like Greg mentioned, I think she is probably one of the most beloved elected officials the shore had, to tell you the truth. My experience with her has been pretty, light and just where our circulation area is. But, I agree with Greg's summation that, I've feel like there is, you get to that 20-year level,
Yeah.
you start to see, so maybe some, not necessarily dedication or anything like that, but you're more vulnerable to somebody, some fresh blood, and I think that appears to be. But her legacy is secure, and I think she is really a beloved elected official. And after 27 years, that's pretty impressive to me.
Yeah, even in our election guide that we did, you asked candidates the same three questions, and Johnny had the solid, strong answers that hit on all the issues, and Addie's answers were kind of meandering, and just they weren't as focused. And I kind of knew that she might be distracted even then, and I think that might have been part of her overall performance.
But Greg, what do you think is going to be her legacy? I mean, do you think is there something that she did that you think that was going to stand out?
Addie was all about healthcare. She was a nurse, a mental health nurse, and she was all about healthcare. And she was a healthcare expert. Certainly, when we went through the changes with healthcare and the Medicare changes, she was a leader on that in Annapolis. I think she actually did a better job when she was in the House of Delegates. She seemed to have more power there, and she got along. She cut lots of deals. She was part of a lot more conversations. When you're a Republican in the state Senate, you really are in a severe minority, and it's more difficult to work with people. And she would argue that she worked great with people, and I know she did, but I think she had more influence as a delegate, and maybe that was her undoing.
Do you think it's going to be a shortcoming for Mounts?
For Mounts?
Yeah.
No, I think he'll. Well, the whole state thing, and we'll have lots of time to talk about this during the fall. But the state government is going to change so much if you have Wes Moore as a governor who's not an insider, and he's going to be talking to delegates and senators who he's not going to have worked with ever, and there are going to be people that are completely labeled. So, will Johnny Mounts ever really get a lot of time with Wes Moore to try to lobby for stuff? I don't think so. I think that those Democrats are going to push the far right people even more out of the picture. And then you get a situation, like where will Carl Anderton play into this? He's done good about walking both sides of the aisle and getting us funding, a la Norm Conway for a long time. It's going to be really awkward. Mary Beth Carrozza, her in was she's friends with the governor. She got listened to. She's now going to be a Republican in a Democratic administration, Democratic majority, and we're hearing that Bill Ferguson, the state Senate president, who's been pretty moderate, moderized, I guess, during his transition so far. Now that there's been an election, he's going to become like Mike Miller. He's going to be very aggressive and expect more from Democrats and nothing from Republicans.
Steve, as a matter of fact, talking about Mary Beth Carrozza, we of course had the Democrat Michelle Gregory. She's a city council member here. How do you read that race? I mean, are we just simply going to look at Mary Beth Carrozza being able to, say, win just simply because of the demographics in terms of politics, that is the Republican district, as she did, for instance, in ousting Jim Mathias, or does she have any real chance? I mean, how do you read that?
Yes, I don't see, all due respect, Michelle Gregory having any chance of knocking off Carrozza. Carrozza, as you mentioned, of course, 4 years ago, that was the race of at least for our area, that was the race of the election. Seeing the Hogan-backed Carrozza knock off Mathias, and that clearly that Hogan influence had a major impact on that election, propelling Carrozza from a delegate to a senator. I don't see Carrozza personally had any trouble at all. For one thing, just based on the R before her name, but also the fact that she does a wonderful job of communicating what she does in Annapolis, which is important because Greg just outlined a lot of things. You sometimes wonder if the Republicans that we send up there have any sort of clout at all. With Hogan, there was hope. They're going to have even more challenges now than they already had, and they will probably be largely ignored. But in that vein, Carrozza does do a good job of communicating with her constituents what exactly she does on a daily basis. She's during the legislative session. She sends out a very detailed report on her week, which is a great read. She does well with social media as well, sending that out. So she, tooting her own horn, probably, yeah. But she also, it's important to let people know what she is doing for the shore in the legislature. But man, it's going to be a tough road for her and Delegate Hartman. I mean, it's almost that's where I think Tuesday's vote of Cox is such a huge depressant for the Republican elected officials on the shore.
Greg? Steve, I'm glad you said that because I didn't want to be the one to say it. First, with Mary Beth, she's got $199,000 in her account to spend. And Michelle Gregory has about $11,000. So I think that says a lot right there. But Mary Beth, of course, was a big supporter of Kelly Schultz, campaigned very hard for her, was friends with Kelly. Now, will she have to support Dan Cox? We've seen her walk the line on Trump. What will she do about Cox? Will people try to tie her to Cox? Is this going to be hard for her? And I count on you and your paper to give us lots of great coverage on Mary Beth's consternation with Dan Cox.
Well, we speak with
man, she'll read the tea leaves on that one, I think. She will definitely see that as like, this is an opportunity to potentially ingratiate herself with the Senate president. I mean, I don't know that I wouldn't put it past her to flip, on this. And
she's a Republican through and through. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a Republican.
But she's the old style. She's the Wayne Gilchrist Republican more. She'd be insulted by me saying that, but she's a Larry Hogan Republican is what she is. So she is definitely a moderate Republican.
Yeah, I'll just be clear. I don't see her flipping party. I see her potentially.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Sitting out the.
Yes.
Not aligning herself with Cox.
Yes.
Probably just being mute on that.
Yes.
And maybe private. That's where I was more. So I definitely don't. Yeah, she's not going to change party. It's
Gotcha.
More maybe sitting out to support.
Well, we're speaking with Greg Bassett. He's the general manager and editor of the Salisbury Independent newspaper. And on the phone this morning has been Stephen Green, publisher and editor of the Maryland Coast Dispatch. Appreciate you both sitting in with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.